Coming up on News 3 at 6, cleanup continues in parts of the area still dealing with the effects of recent historic flooding. And another win for the Wisconsin Badgers football team. News 3's Jay Wilson has a game summary straight ahead.
This is News 3 at 6.
Good evening and thanks for watching News 3 at 6. I'm Amanda Quintana. It's another win for the Wisconsin Badgers today, taking on New Mexico. News 3 Sports Director Jay Wilson has the highlights from Camp Randall.
The Badgers were 35-point favorites coming into the game, but there were plenty of nervous moments. But in the end, Wisconsin showed its dominance and beat New Mexico 45-14. It was a game early in the third quarter, 10-7 Wisconsin, but then the defense made a big play that sparked the turnaround. Scott Nelson intercepted a pass at the Badger 2-yard line, and that started a long drive the other way. A drive that was capped off by an Alex Hornibrook to A.J. Taylor touchdown pass. Taylor with a career receiving day with over 130 yards. And speaking of career days, running back Jonathan Taylor, who had an early fumble, helped turn that day around too. 253 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns as Wisconsin goes to 2-0 in the season with a 45-14 win over New Mexico. Later in sports, we'll hear from the Badgers after their post-game win against the Lobos. At Camp Randall Stadium, Jay Wilson, News 3 Sports.
Thanks, Jay. The Badgers will take on the BYU Cougars next week at Camp Randall before going on the road for their first conference game against the Iowa Hawkeyes. 6th grade athletes from Reedsburg and Waunakee met on the football field today in a scene of true sportsmanship. The city of Reedsburg suffered significant flooding last month, and the impact has touched the friends and family of the Beavers teammates. The coach of the Waunakee Warriors team was also affected by the disaster when his father lost everything during flooding in Mazomanie. So when he learned their team would be facing Reedsburg, he announced a goods drive for victims of the flooding. To the Reedsburg coach, the act encapsulated the spirit of the game.
Football is a part of it, but it's more about, teamwork, respect for other people, and just being a competitor. And, like I said, with bringing in, what Waunakee had done, it's pretty special.
In just 24 hours, the goods drive filled an entire garage full of donations. What a cool story. All right, Dave Caulfield joins us with your first alert forecast. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Amanda. The dry weather sticking around for our Saturday, and it will be here as we head into next week as well. A little bit more sunshine on this Saturday as well. Downtown Madison on the Edgewater Skycam looking at some clouds, but also some sunshine and temperatures in the upper 60s right now. East-northeast wind, still a little bit breezy at about 10 to 20 miles per hour. Right now, 11 in Madison. Doppler track is quiet across Wisconsin. We have some rain way up to the north and also to the south and east, but those rain showers moving out of Indiana right now. But the clouds have really not been around too much, so it's been quiet on Doppler track and pretty quiet on satellite as well. Temperatures are in the 60s and low 70s. Another cool-ish day outside. Wind speeds helping with that cool down. Temperatures are in the 60s in part because of those northeast winds at about 10 to 20 miles per hour. This evening, temperatures continuing to fall through the 60s into the lower 50s, partly cloudy, pleasant, and breezy. We'll talk about possibly the coolest night in more than 3 months ahead of us, plus what to expect with temperatures next week in your first alert forecast in just a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Dave. We've heard so many stories of those who lost everything from the floods. While a lot of businesses can't reopen with how much damage they've received, there are some lucky ones. Jamie Perez takes us inside the Children's Museum in Black Earth to show us how they're overcoming the flood damage.
The beloved Children's Museum in Black Earth has been closed for several weeks now. After pumping out more than 300,000 gallons of water, they're rebuilding. While so many other businesses have closed permanently from flood damage, Karen Carlock is too determined to do that.
So we opened in June of 2017, and then since then we've had over 15,000 people come through our doors. We have over 350 memberships. So it's been really successful beyond what I ever imagined.
A fun space for kids' birthday parties, this space has been a dream come true for Karen and thousands of others.
I love hearing the parents say, it's just so easy to bring my kids here and they have so much fun.
But before the fun can start up again, they've still got some work to do.
And it actually came all the way up to this step, and you can see the grime on there. So it filled the entire basement and then came up the stairs. So we just, By about like 1.5 feet, we avoided having water on the main level and hitting all the exhibits.
Just barely saved from the mess of floodwaters, all of the exhibits went untouched.
I gotta tell you, the first thing I thought was, oh, I'm so thankful it didn't reach our exhibit level.
But the damage to the basement was still enough to close up shop for weeks.
This was actually a finished office space, all wired for desks and computers and such, so it all had to be gutted.
You can see there's even still some water on the floors.
It had a much larger impact than I thought, even though it was all kind of all in the basement level.
The basement is much more than just museum storage space. The community's food pantry kept many cans of food on these shelves, which are obviously gone now. But at the end of this month, the 29th, there's going to be a big welcome back for the food pantry and the museum.
But we're committed to getting the building back up and operational, and we want to see the food pantry and the museum continue to succeed.
An end of summer celebration and a grand reopening to welcome back the space that serves many in Black Earth as a second home. In Black Earth, Jamie Perez, WISC News 3.
As Jamie mentioned, September 29th is the grand reopening day. They are planning to have a big celebration at the museum with new exhibits. In Rock County today, golfers were supporting research on childhood cancer today at the Hole-in-One for Harlow fundraising golf scramble. Harlow Phillips is a young girl suffering from neuroblastoma. Since her family found out about her diagnosis about a year ago, the community has rallied in support behind her. Today's golf event is one way her family can fund research and keep hope strong for children who are affected.
We are feeling a lot of hope and a lot of promise. Unfortunately, research costs a lot of money, and so we're trying to make an event that's going to raise a significant amount of money, but it's also going to be fun for people.
The top scoring golfer at the event had the chance to win $1 million if they scored a final hole-in-one. Coming up, drugs in your meat. Consumer Reports investigates why banned and restricted antibiotics are ending up in the food you could be eating.
No one's
Welcome back. Former President Barack Obama is hitting the campaign trail ahead of the midterm election in November. He made a get out the vote push in California today. Meg Oliver reports from New York.
Former President Barack Obama stepped back onto the political stage to rally voters to support Democratic candidates in California.
If these candidates win, I am absolutely confident that Washington will start working better.
President Obama is trying to fire up the Democratic base in an effort to take back the House of Representatives in November.
The fact is that if we don't step up, things can get worse.
Mr. Obama had plenty to say about his successor, President Trump, and the current state of democracy.
The biggest threat to our democracy, I said yesterday, is not, it's not one individual. It's not one big super PAC billionaires. It's apathy. It's indifference.
During a speech in Illinois Friday, Mr. Obama also criticized the Republican Party for not standing up to President Trump.
It's not conservative. It sure isn't normal. It's radical.
President Trump attacked the speech during a rally in South Dakota.
I watched it, but I fell asleep. I found he's very good for sleeping.
President Obama's aides promise a fall campaign blitz around the country with stops in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Meg Oliver, CBS News, New York.
Coming up next on News 3 at 6, drugs, including a hallucinogenic party drug and antidepressant, are being found in meat. But the USDA and FDA don't really know why. That story when News 3 at 6 continues.
And the dry weather continuing into next week. We'll talk about temperatures as we head into next week in your First Alert forecast in just a few minutes.
Will your
It sounds alarming. Banned drugs, everything from antibiotics to antidepressants, found in beef, poultry, and pork. Now, a new Consumer Reports investigation raises serious questions about how the drugs got there and why a federal agency is not doing more about it.
Food scientists at Consumer Reports analyzed government data from nearly 6,000 samples of meat collected over an 11-month period from 2015 to 2016.
What was explosive is immediately seeing these drugs, which were never approved for use in food animals, because they're highly hazardous, still showing up in the food supply. It was sort of stunning.
Drugs like chloramphenicol, an antibiotic linked to potentially deadly anemia, and ketamine, a hallucinogenic party drug and antidepressant, among others. All of them banned or severely restricted drugs, yet trace amounts have shown up in meat samples. And no one, including the USDA or FDA, seems to know exactly how they're getting into the meat supply.
They should have found out why these things are showing up in dozens and dozens of samples of meat and poultry. It can't just be an accident.
So why isn't the government doing more about it? The chief scientist for USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service tells Consumer Reports that essentially the data were what they called unconfirmed screening tests, so no further action from the USDA was required. None of this surprises Will Harris, owner of White Oak Pastures, an organic farm in Georgia. He blames decades of industrialized farming and shoppers' demands for cheap food for why this could be happening.
And I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but you told me that these prohibited drugs have been found in samples of meat. And I guess that would be pretty proof positive that somebody somewhere wasn't doing what they're supposed to do.
Since it's unclear what, if any, health effects result from eating meat and poultry contain drug residues, Consumer Reports says you don't have to eliminate it from your diet, but perhaps think about reducing the amount you eat or making different choices at the market.
Consumer Reports says organic and grass-fed meat might contain